Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Thank you guys for tuning in for this is my second live ever on YouTube a year ago, and I have myself open another tab. Hold on. All right. For some reason, I can't see the comments. Trying to figure this out. Jake says, "Hey, what's up, Jake?" All right. Hold on. Okay. Cool. So I got a few questions from people that I sent out. Jake said, "¿Cómo te llamas?" Me llamo Connor. I got a few questions that I sent out from people on my email list that I sent out, and I figured I'd start with those first. And I also got some questions from people in the community tab here on YouTube. So I posed a little survey on there, and some people asked questions. And so I'm going to go through those in order here. I've got a little document that I'll work through. You guys bear with me for 1 second. All right. So, um, let's see if I can see chat. All right. So the first question that I had from somebody was related to word order in Spanish. Their question was, I'll type. Their question was, that sometimes word order is a little confusing, especially when the noun comes at the end of the word. When the noun comes at the end of the word, at the end of the verb, sorry, it's a little bit confusing sometimes. It's unclear what's going on there. Why is sometimes the noun coming at the end of the word, the end of the verb, the end of the sentence? Why is the noun coming at the end of the sentence? Is there a rule related to that? And I think what he's talking about is what this person was talking about is situations like when you say, for example, talking about a book. Who wrote the book? El libro lo escribió Juan. Juan coming at the end. Why is that happening? Because Spanish is a language just like English, where we have subject, verb, object. So you've got the subject, you know, the person that you're talking about. So the name or the pronoun. Um, Ella camina en el parque. She walks in the park. Those three things: subject, verb, object. It's the same kind of sentence structure as in English, but sometimes in Spanish, the word order is a little bit more flexible than in English. You don't have to say, you don't have to do have sentences go in the exact same order as you do in English. It's not as strict as English word order is. So, for example, you might hear somebody say, like, pick up their phone. They pick up their phone and you could hear someone say, Mi papá me está llamando. Mi papá me está llamando. My dad is calling me, with mi papá coming first. Or you could hear them say, Me está llamando mi papá. Me está llamando mi papá, with mi papá coming at the end. Either one's okay. In some situations where you put the noun could change a little bit the emphasis that you place on in the sentence, whether or not you're really emphasizing the fact that it was your dad who was calling you versus just I'm getting a call. Or in another example, you might say, like, you could say, La casa no es muy grande. La casa no es muy grande. The house is not very big. But you could also say, No es muy grande la casa. No es muy grande la casa. It's not very big, the house, literally. Which one you would choose is not exactly a question of right or wrong, but more like I think very often, if you're in a situation where you already know you're talking about the house, for example, say we're pointing at a house and you want to know, and you're describing it, you already know you're talking about the house. The emphasis there is on whether it's big or not. No es muy grande la casa. No es muy grande la casa. It's not very big, the house. And there, the emphasis is on the fact that it's not that big. But if you were to just say out of the blue, esa casa no es muy grande, that might be more common. But I mean, to be honest, there's not a big difference. You could also hear someone saying, you know, ¿quién escribió? Or like, Juan escribió una carta. Juan escribió una carta. Juan wrote a letter. You could also equally say, if you were referencing that kind of later, you could say, ah, la carta la escribió Juan. Oh, the letter, it Juan wrote it, but with Juan coming at the end. So in a nutshell, it's just kind of a shorter, um, it's kind of a flexible word order that we don't really have in English. And in English, we sometimes have awkward sentence structures because of this. But in Spanish, you can move the noun around to several different places. It's not nearly as rigid as English word order is. So in terms of if there's a rule for it or not, I would say you're always safe going with like the subject, verb, object, traditional order. Juan comió una manzana. Juan ate an apple. But you can also change it up depending on context. And the best advice that I can give you related to when to change it up is just to listen to as much Spanish as you can. And you'll just start to build an intuition for when it sounds natural for the noun to come later. It's not really a thing that you can force, in my opinion. Instead, it's more just something that is that becomes a habit over time, and it just comes out. You're not going to whenever you do that and put the noun at the end of the sentence, for example, you're not going to do it intentionally. Probably it'll just happen, and that's because you'll have thousands of hours of Spanish in your mind that are rattling around in there, putting pieces together for you, and making it come out in that way. Okay, the next question was, can you share any tips about preterite and imperfect? Um, yes, I do have a full video on this. It's like 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's an introduction to the preterite and imperfect. These are two tenses that are for talking about the past. If you're not familiar with them, so I'd recommend that you check out that video on my channel. It walks you through those two concepts in kind of a visual way. So check that out. But in a nutshell, the two verb tenses are used to talk about different situations in the past. Imperfect, you can think of it as, um, well, let's start with the preterite. The preterite is the one that is maybe the simple past, like I walked yesterday, versus I was walking yesterday would be the imperfect. Or I was walking yesterday and then this thing happened and interrupted my walk. I was walking yesterday and then um, I saw my friend. Estaba caminando or caminaba. I was walking. That's the imperfect. Y vi a un amigo. And then I saw a friend. That's the preterite, the one that interrupted. So I can't go into a bunch of detail on it here because it would take a while. But the short answer is you can think of the preterite as the time frame in the past that you use when you don't have when you have a definitive time frame, when something started and stopped within a certain time frame. And you can think of the imperfect as something that's a little bit more nebulous, that it didn't necessarily come and go, or sorry, it didn't necessarily have a start and stop date or time, but instead it's more of like a kind of the equivalent in English of I was doing this or this was going on, just like a broad general past. Next question was, how to think in Spanish easily. How do I think in Spanish easily? There's no really easy way to do this. I would say that the simplest advice that I can give you is to start small because you already do think in Spanish to a degree. This is a topic that I also made a video on before, where you can, um, uh, you know, you are already thinking in Spanish when you say things like "cómo estás" or "cómo te llamas" without thinking. Those phrases, even after your first week of learning Spanish, they just come out probably naturally without you having to think of, okay, what's the English of what's your name? You just say "cómo te llamas," and it just comes out, even though that phrase is not the same as it is in English. So you already have instances where you think in Spanish in the sense that the Spanish just comes out. And building speaking skills, building skills in Spanish where you are thinking in Spanish, quote unquote, that's just a process of doing more and more of that, of of adding more and more situations where you can speak, where the words just start to come out naturally. And to do that, I think probably the simplest thing is to speak in shorter, simpler sentences. Especially early on, it's difficult not to want to have really elaborate sentences that you want to put together in Spanish because you have these elaborate English sentences going on in your mind, and you want to be able to put them together in Spanish. Uh, but instead, it's a lot simpler, I would say, to just try to simplify whatever it is you're trying to say. Have your sentence start and stop, go kind of have get in and out with your thought as much as you can. And you can increase the elaborateness of the way that you speak as you go. But a key to thinking in Spanish is to simplify what you're trying to say. Another question was, did you ever work or study abroad anywhere to learn or improve your Spanish? Um, yeah, yeah, I did. So I did both, kind of. Main thing is that I studied abroad. I learned Spanish in school. Like a lot of people in the US, I took Spanish in high school and I learned some. But where I made a lot of progress was I was an exchange student in Chile for a year. And then after that, in college, I continued to take Spanish classes and I got to work in Peru for 6 weeks for a summer. And then after that, I had some jobs where Spanish was part of my work. So it's been kind of both, where Spanish has been part of my life for a long time. But the big things that have really helped me make progress, or the big things where situations where I felt progress was when I was forced to speak on a regular basis. And for me, that was being abroad, being in a Spanish speaking country for an extended period of time. This is related to this person's second question, which is, do you think it's possible to learn a language from home? Or do you recommend going to the country where the language is spoken to learn that language? Um, because I went and I lived in Chile and I spent a lot of time in Peru and I've spent a lot of time in Argentina, um, those trips helped a lot, and they were, yeah, they were invaluable in my experience. But it is not necessary in order to build really good communication skills in Spanish. You can build the skills that you need to communicate effectively in Spanish and really use and enjoy the language without living abroad. You don't need to live abroad in order to make that happen. Um, you can do this, in my experience. Well, I know this from personal experience and from seeing lots of other people who have learned, for example, English really well without ever having lived in the US or in England. This is something that you see online all the time. And in my personal experience, I've been learning German for the last 2.5 years or so. And I don't speak it anywhere near perfectly, but I can have comfortable conversations for a long period of time on a wide range of topics. And in some situations, it just comes out pretty smoothly. And I surprise myself, despite the fact that I've never lived there and I don't have a lot of contact with Germans. Um, on a daily basis or anything like that. It's just a matter of consistent practice. And you probably know people who have lived in a Spanish speaking country, but despite that, haven't made a lot of progress in their Spanish. And that's because being in a Spanish speaking country, while it's beneficial, is not a it's not the thing that's gonna make you better at Spanish. You have to intentionally immerse yourself. And thanks to the internet, you can intentionally immerse yourself from home, wherever that is, or abroad, either one. Regardless of where you live, it's important to immerse yourself at home also, because if you live in Mexico, for example, and you spend 23 hours a day doing stuff in, well, okay, without sleep, but whatever, 18 hours a day doing stuff in English, 17 hours a day, and then 1 hour a day you're doing something in Spanish, just like interacting at the grocery store and at the market, your Spanish will kind of top out at the level that you need for those situations, which if that's your goal, that's okay. But if you want to improve beyond that, it's going to be hard if you don't actually learn beyond those situations and intentionally work in a structured, goal focused way and build Spanish into your life on a daily basis at home. This person's Their other questions was, do you know any other languages besides Spanish? And are you currently learning any other languages besides Spanish? Well, yeah, German is the one that I've been learning for the last couple years, and that's at a decent level, I would say. And then I speak French and Portuguese. Unfortunately, those are out of practice, but I can still have conversations. They're just a little bit rusty because I don't practice them on a regular basis, which happens. But yeah, they've been a part of my life for a long time, just like Spanish. I started learning Portuguese probably 12 years ago, and French probably 10 years ago. And I've gotten to live in both Brazil and France, and they were awesome experiences. Highly would recommend going to either of those places if you can. My experiences with those languages have definitely helped me with Spanish, and vice versa. Spanish helped me a lot with those languages. So if you make progress in Spanish and you get curious about Portuguese, for example, you'll have a huge leg up in learning that one. All right, got a couple questions in the chat here. Ralph says, when in your learning process did you become comfortable or feel more natural speaking to native speakers in a public setting? Um, when did I feel more comfortable or speaking? When did you become more comfortable or feel more natural speaking to native speakers in a public setting? I would say probably after the first time that I ever spoke Spanish, I was extremely nervous. I went to Guatemala with my dad when I was 15, and we spent like 10 days there. And I knew, a decent amount of school Spanish, and I was really interested in Spanish, but I was terrified to speak. So for like 9 days, I didn't say anything in Spanish besides maybe saying, gracias, and what I wanted to order at a restaurant. But finally, like after a week, I built up the courage to say something to one of the Guatemalan guys that was with us, and we had a simple conversation. I have no idea about what it was about, but after that, I started to feel a little bit more comfortable in putting myself out there and wanting to speak with people rather than being terrified of the idea of speaking with people. The next thing that helped a ton was um, I went back to Guatemala the following year for 3 weeks, and I did a language school for where I had a teacher, and did like kind of conversational classes on a daily basis for 3 weeks, and I made a huge amount of progress in that time. And I think what was especially beneficial to that was the fact that I was able to speak with one person and build up my confidence with one person, and then go out and practice it on a regular basis outside of the classroom. So those were really helpful. I want to be, I guess, careful with that sort of recommendation though, because I think it's or that story, and give you the caveat that I don't think it's necessary again to go to a language school abroad, for example, to make progress. Um, Again, in my own experience with German, I've been able to make a lot of progress despite I've never been to Germany and I've never done anything nearly as intensive as that. You can make faster progress for sure if you go to uh, Colombia or Guatemala or anywhere for 3 weeks or 2 months and intensively do conversation practice. But it's definitely not necessary. You can make real progress just at a slightly slower pace, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, so I would say, to answer your question, Ralph, circle back to that. You know, to when I started to feel more comfortable was probably after that. After I was able to have those regular extended conversations with people, with one teacher for a few weeks. I was still nervous talking to new people, but a lot less so, a lot less than I had been. This next comment says, I'm Japanese. I study Spanish every day on Duolingo, but speaking is different. Yes, speaking is definitely different. Um, Speaking is definitely different. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it is a big difference between studying just on your phone, like the using your fingers on your phone to learn a language is one thing, and it's beneficial in the sense that those words are in some way entering your long-term memory, but being able to learn them in one context and then apply them in another is a totally different skill. And an app like Duolingo doesn't really help you bridge the gap between those two skills. So it's important to supplement, if you're using Duolingo or any other app, it's important to supplement that with a thing that forces you to take what you're learning and put it into practice. I mean, the simplest way is to create your own sentences with any new word that you learn, so that any new word that you learn, the first time you go to use it in conversation isn't the first time you've ever said it. Um, the next question, oh, back to the person. Curious about your experience in Brazil. Did you feel safe living there? Do you think the dangers about Brazil are blown out of proportion? I lived in a really small town in Western Sao Paulo. It was super rural, really great place. I made a lot of good friends. It was awesome. I really loved it, the whole experience in Brazil. I didn't spend any time in Rio, and I was in Sao Paulo, the city, only for a couple of weekends. So I don't have a realistic perspective on what those places are like. I spent maybe like a week in Salvador in northern Brazil, which was also amazing. That's a city that people in Brazil, at the time at least, were saying wasn't the most safe, but I didn't have any negative experiences the whole time I was there. I would say, just like, I don't know where you're from, but in the US, where I'm from, there are places that are more safe and less safe, and Brazil is enormous, so it's kind of the same thing. Um, Pets World says, I can go to my 9 to 5 job for months and years on end, regardless of how I feel. But the second I have a goal out of work, be it Spanish or the gym, I'm inconsistent, at least long term. I know, that's the hard thing. We're just used to going to work 9 to 5. That's really all it is. You're used to doing that job or whatever it is, your habit, whatever habit you already have ingrained. It's already ingrained. You don't have to think about whether you're doing it. Same thing goes for the other habits that you already have. Whatever it is that you do in the morning before going to work, you probably have a set of habits that you do that you don't really think about. So the key is to try to turn Spanish into something that is as natural to you as brushing your teeth or whatever, putting on your shoes, whatever you do before work. Um, a simple way to think about that is to attach learning Spanish to something that you already do. Like, think of a time, like for me, it's got to be in the morning if I want to start a new habit, and I'm doing it and I try to do it anytime that's not the morning, it doesn't work. It doesn't stick. Things always happen. I'm inconsistent, just like you said. If I do it in the morning, if I dedicate 20 minutes on a consistent basis to whatever that thing is, then it's out of the way. I've done it for the day and I don't have to keep thinking about it. And as soon as I don't do it, though, if it's after lunch or whatever, then I just don't do it. If I don't do the thing in the morning, I won't do it. So I think that's the case for a lot of people, just because our days can get busy. So if you can, I would recommend trying to do it in the morning. your Spanish, and do way less than you think you can do. Make your goal to only do 5 minutes. There's a cool book that maybe you've heard of that's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Super useful and interesting book about building habits. And in it, he talks a lot about simplifying habits down to kind of their core elements. And one cool example that he gives is if you were trying to go for a run every morning before work, instead of making the goal be to run 10 miles, you got to make your goal something so simple that you can't not do it. So he suggested in this case to take your running shoes, put them next to your bed, and then every morning all you have to do is put on your running shoes. Once your running shoes are on, the momentum has started to build and you're probably going to go for a run. It's something that simple can help you set off the chain of events that needs to happen in order for you to do your new habit. So with Spanish, if you can think of something simple that you can attach whatever the first step is in your learning habit, whether that's opening your notebook or I don't know, whatever you identify the first step in your own Spanish learning habit, identify that and say, okay, every day at this time that I know I can do it, that I don't have things going on, every day at this time, maybe 7 a.m., I do that thing. Every day at 7 a.m., I do that very first thing in my list of Spanish, like open the notebook, open this app, say one sentence in Spanish, whatever it is, just like the first thing to get the ball rolling. And then most likely you're going to keep going. So you set your goal to do that one thing and then say, all I have to do is 3 minutes of Spanish. 3 minutes, that's it. Something so easy that every day you have time for it. And if you start small like that, I think it can build into something that'll be more significant for your Spanish growth. I mean, doing 3 minutes a day won't make a big difference, but most likely once you start, you'll do a little bit more. And that's how habits like that start to stick. Arnold said, as an aside, there are studies that indicate that people who learn multiple languages have a particular area of the brain that is more efficient than usual. Maybe so. I don't know. I don't feel like an especially efficient person. I just happen to really enjoy Spanish and learning languages in general. But I think that regardless of your interests or your what you feel like your strengths are, there's a pretty good chance that learning Spanish is possible for you because at the end of the day, it's not the most complicated thing in the world. It has more to do with consistency and sticking with it for long enough to make progress than it does with any kind of superhuman abilities like being a math genius might entail. The elements of Spanish are not any more complicated than the elements of your own native language. It's just a matter of getting used to them. And you can either get used to them in a really intense way, hours a day, 3 months, see how much I can learn, or you can plug away at it little by little, 30 minutes a day, over a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you won't notice any progress on a daily basis. But when you look back 2.5 years down the road, think, oh crap, I've made a bunch of progress. I didn't really notice it along the way. And it doesn't involve being particularly gifted in any way in order to make progress in that way. It's just about consistently making effort, using content and uh, yeah, content that you enjoy, learning from things that you enjoy, not forcing yourself to do stuff you hate. Just basically finding things that you like in your native language that you like to watch or like to listen to, and finding the Spanish equivalents of those, making them part of your life. Over time, I think that the Spanish skills, whatever they are, they start to kind of work their way in naturally into your brain. Cool. I'll leave it there. We're at the 30-minute mark, which is the end of the broadcast, so I gotta cut it off. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate the questions. If you are interested in any more help with your Spanish, I'll leave a link in the description of this video, but you can go to my website, breakthroughspanish.com, and there's a banner right up at the top for a 6-week conversation focused program that I'm running starting tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last day to apply to sign up. It's for upper beginner, lower intermediate Spanish learners who I think a lot of the people who watch this channel are kind of in that level where maybe you feel stuck in your Spanish. You've been learning for a while, but you actually like taking the next step to have real conversations in your Spanish um, is really challenging. So anyway, if that sounds interesting to you, check it out. All the information's at breakthroughspanish.com/join, or you can just go to breakthroughspanish.com and click the big link at the top of the page that says, I think, get the details or learn more or something like that. There's about one more day to until enrollment closes. There's a little form where you can enter your information. I'll ask you a couple questions about your level in Spanish to see if it would be, I think it'd be a good fit for you at your current level. And then we'll speak on a twice weekly basis. We'll do Q&As and conversation practice on a regular basis, and you'll get tons of help in other ways and get more direction in your Spanish. Check that out, breakthroughspanish.com. Thank you again for being here. Thank you guys for asking me to do more live streams. I'll try to work that in. If you have any video suggestions in the meantime, you can always leave them here in the comments of this video, or feel free to message me. Um, Feel free to message me anywhere. Hola amigo, el español es mi lengua materna, pero me gusta escucharte como parte de mi inmersión en el idioma inglés. Gracias por estar aquí. Me alegra que estés viendo mis videos y que te pueda ayudar con tu inglés al mismo tiempo. Anyway, thank you guys. Have a good night.